You're listening to an IOE podcast from the UCL Institute of Education at University College London. The IOE was saddened to hear of the passing of Gunther Kress, Professor of Semiotics and Education, on June 20th, 2019. A widely regarded academic, linguist, semiotician and social theorist, Professor Kress was a pioneer of critical linguistics, critical discourse analysis and social semiotics. In this 2011 interview, Professor Kress spoke about the kind of role semiotics and education can play when it comes to making meaning. He's joined by Sophia Diamantopolou, a student at the time of recording and currently a senior teaching fellow at the UCL Centre for Applied Linguistics.
In fact, I came here as Professor of English, which led at times to peculiar exchanges when I came back from outside England into the UK, and people said, "And what do you do, sir?" And I said, I teach at the University of London. "What do you teach?" "English." And they looked at my passport, which said Australian, born in Germany. But and maybe that's quite important, that my background is of somebody who's learned one culture and one language and moved to another place and learned another language and another culture. And then I suppose that relation of language and culture became my professional interest in a particular way. Namely, not here's culture and here's language, but really that these things are ultimately and intricately connected, and then exploring what that connection is like. But at the same time, and that became a longer term interest of mine, going away from what had been a kind of a common sense in the West, namely that it's through language that we understand culture.
Right. How did it all start with social semiotics and your engagement with that field?
My first academic experience was as having a degree in English literature, then moving to an interest in linguistics, the study of language as a phenomenon, and then a dissatisfaction with maybe language or linguistics not giving you a full insight into what meaning was about. Looking then, for instance, when I shifted jobs from teaching linguistics to teaching cultural studies, looking at images and thinking of images not just as decorative and as other kinds of things that there are, but maybe if you saw an advertisement which was mainly image and had hardly any language, beginning to think that we need to rethink the significance of language if we're thinking about meaning. And then, of course, the discipline which deals with that is not linguistics, but semiotics, which says we're interested in all those things through which we make meaning or through which we engage with meaning or experience meaning.
Right. And moving on to another field, the field of multimodality. Your name is mainly associated with the development of multimodality and its links to discourse analysis. So there's another interesting story there. How you move from your interest in language actually shifted to engaging with the diversity of modes.
One of my teachers, in fact I did a degree, a postgraduate degree at University College, not all that far from here, and my teacher was Michael Halliday. And Michael Halliday had done his PhD on Chinese. Now Chinese is actually different to English in lots of ways, and most of the grammars that we deal with are written by Europeans in relation to European languages, but he read a grammar which was based on Chinese. And a distinctive thing about Chinese is that its script system is very different to its the spoken version. So for him, he treated speech and writing as quite distinct ways of making meaning. And that gave me the first kind of insight that we can't just sort of talk blandly about language as such, but we need to be specific. And so from that notion of being specific, then also, as I mentioned, this interest, once I became interested in media and advertising and cultural studies, this interest not only in writing and then in speaking as different kinds of things, but also in image as contributing to meaning, music as a means of making meaning, and so suddenly you realize that language is enormously important and only one way in which we make meaning. If you then begin to look at how we make meaning, for instance, at the moment I'm gesturing a bit, you say, well, what is the gesture supplying that my speech isn't supplying, or my facial expressions? And then you're beginning to say, language does a part of the work of making meaning, a gesture does another part, or image in a textbook or something. And then you begin to see that really you have a rich orchestration of meaning.
It's a kind of invitation to look for meaning elsewhere, beyond language, looking at the...
It's an invitation to look at meaning where it is. And in relation to education, of course, it becomes really important, because education has for a long time looked at language, and so a lot of research over decades has assumed that if we understand what happens in speech in classrooms, we will understand what happens in terms of teaching and learning. And that multimodality would say, well, that's a very, very partial impression.
Gunther, you bring in diversity of resources from the fields of semiotics, linguistics, multimodality, discourse analysis. How have all this shaped your engagement with learning and education when you moved to the Institute of Education several years ago?
Well, I came to the field of education quite late. I came here as Professor of English. But because I came as an outsider, I looked at English and I thought, well, actually, what is the subject English doing in the English national curriculum? It isn't only teaching young people something about the great works of literature, and it isn't only teaching them to construct sentences and maybe paragraphs and texts, but it's also, one hopes, enabling them to act fully in the communicational world that they will be entering.
Your work places a lot of emphasis on the interests of the learners, on the agency of the learner, and on the concept of recognition, recognizing the learner's production, the learner's engagement with the world, which has a lot of implications for the development of pedagogies today.
Absolutely.
Would you like to talk a little bit about this and how this interest emerged, your interest
My interest
in that
emerged, yes. Well, if you link it on the one hand to the fact that you might be in an MA class with 26 students or 20 students in 26 languages, it would be important to recognize the wealth of thinking, the wealth of experience, the wealth of different kinds of things which are brought in there, and to give recognition to it. Now, of course, if you teach something around language or literacy or writing, it's fantastically interesting to say to somebody who comes from mainland China and to talk about a script system which is totally unlike an alphabetic script system, and where the alphabet isn't a transcription of how the language is spoken, but it's a completely separate, parallel kind of system that enriches the class. It enriches the experience of everybody in the class, but only if you give recognition to it. If you say, look, isn't that fantastic?
Right, and these shifts of power you referred to are quite significant. And I was wondering whether these would characterize more particular parts of the Western world, maybe, especially in terms of education, and how one would perceive these coming from different cultures, whether different research practices, different education paradigms. And this encounter with the new, how would it be? And from your experience, how has it been for international students in particular?
Well, Sophia, you yourself know that coming from Greece, the experience of a child in a Greek school is different, even now, to the experience of a child in a school in London. So even within Europe, there are massive differences. So I think we are a kind of laboratory in London, in which these things have to be kind of, globalization is experienced every day, in every classroom here at the Institute, and everybody who participates is part of an experiment in working that out.
Over the year, you've worked with hundreds of students who've come here for postgraduate degrees, either an MA, an MPhil, or a PhD. And most of these students come from literally all over the world. I was wondering what your experience has been of that, and what have you learned as a supervisor from meeting the new, meeting the other, kind of other research practices or completely different viewpoints?
I counted the other day, and I think I've had nearly 60 people doing PhDs with me. That's quite a lot.
Indeed.
I've learned some very simple things, which are really, really important, namely to listen very carefully. And because we've been in that relation, I think I know, differently to you, of course, as much about what you do as you know, a different kind of knowing. And that sense of somebody comes into your room and you know what that person's interests are, where they're at in there. So that's an important bit of learning, which I didn't have before. But what I've also learned is precisely this, that every person who comes here comes with a sort of a big bag of riches. It's like, you know, a big bag of jewels and which they bring. And you can benefit from that if you are willing to sort of look when they lay it out and look, oh, this is, and learn. That's, I think, what I've learned. And also that everyone who comes here has as much to give as I could possibly give.
Thank you very much.
Well, can I say thank you to you for very, very thought-provoking questions.
It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for downloading and listening to this IOE podcast. You can find more audio stories from the IOE on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and on your favourite podcasting platform.
UCL Minds brings together the knowledge, insights and ideas of our community through a wide range of events and activities that are open to everyone.